Hello everyone, I'm just going to be doing a weekly outlook for this upcoming week commencing the 20th of July 2026. I'm looking at S&P 500 here. I'm just going to break down what I look for and how I'll mark my charts up before the start of the week. So on the weekly chart, I will identify the previous week's high and the previous week's low. On this occasion, actually, I'm going to mark up all-time highs on the S&P just in case, and I'm also going to mark up on this occasion the weekly low before last week, just because it's relatively equal, and if we do take one or the other, interesting to see what will happen with them relatively equal lows. So when I mark my weekly liquidity up, I'll drop to my daily chart and mark up the previous day's high and low. So we've got Friday's high there, and Friday's low was the low of the week, so that's the same liquidity. High of last week. Yeah, so let me drop to the hourly a second. And just mark up all-time highs, previous week's high, previous daily high, previous week's low, and this was another weekly liquidity. Can't see it. Just to make a note of. In terms of a bias for this week, I'm not married on anything really. I don't have a strong one. Why? Because we're in an uptrend anyway. We're not far away from all-time highs, and last week closed bearish. If we are going to be bearish this week, I wouldn't think it was going to be for too long anyway, due to all-time highs being there. I expect to get all-time highs somewhat soon, but not married to anything much. The only thing I would say is Friday's low, which was also the previous week's low here. That would be my short-term target. I think that will probably definitely go this week, and probably even this weekly low also, with them being relatively equal. I would expect both of them to go, and with Friday's close being near the bottom of the candle, I would definitely expect these two pools of liquidity to go. For a short-term target, say the beginning of the week, and then potentially we could take them and continue higher. We'd have to see how we reacted to that, if we do take them, that is. Not too strong of a bias either way really. I'm just going to play it by ear and react as we go. The only thing I would say is we have zero high impact news this week, with it being summer trading. It's much slower and less news, which obviously drives the market and gives the reason for the market to move. With no news, we can expect smaller range week for sure, potentially even an inside bar, which for those who don't know what an inside bar is, it would be a weekly candle. We're not even on the weekly chart, now we are. Potentially a weekly candle that doesn't take out the previous week's low or the previous week's high and just stays within the previous week's range. With there being no news, we could expect this. It's not even forced to take this low, which I'm expecting to go, nor the high. We'll have to see. but that's a possible scenario that could play out. If early in the week we get a setup that allows me to get short for this low and that low, then I'll take it. I'm still going to potentially trade if something sets up, even though there's no news this week. But just expect and be careful that it could just chop about within this range and be incredibly slow. So no real bias on that as of yet. Same with EURUSD. I'll just whip through the same as I would. No strong bias on EURUSD. However, I am more likely leaning bearish on EURUSD. Let's just mark up the previous week's high, previous week's low. The reason I'll start my analysis by marking the previous week's high and previous week's low liquidity is because 90% of the time we will either take out the previous week's high or the previous week's low. So they're both huge pools of liquidity, which I like to mark up. However, as I previously just said, there's a chance this week that we could see an inside bar and neither of them get taken out, purely because it's summer trading and there's no news. So previous week's high, previous week's low marked out. What I also want to mark out is this weekly fair value gap, and if we zoom in a bit, this weekly volume imbalance. So we'll just drag them out. The reason I've done that is because, and this is also why I'm leaning towards a more bearish EURUSD. Swept liquidity here, huge rejection and displacement to the downside, bearish close below this liquidity, come back up into an OTE of this range, respected this fair value gap, and continue to trade lower. And we've just we've just been respecting bearish PDRAs and disrespecting bullish PDRAs. So we had this down close candle, respected this gap, another down close candle, respected this gap, this order block, and another down close candle. And then last week we have respected this weekly fair value gap, which I've marked, and respected and closed below this volume imbalance on the weekly, which supports the idea of that we're still respecting bearish PDRAs, and that's why I'm leaning towards a more bearish EURUSD this week. But again, not married to anything. I'm not 100%, and plus again with the no news this week and it being summer, not forced to be right. If we go to the daily, previous day's low, previous daily high, and drop to the hourly. And the same again, just mark up my previous daily low, was that? Yeah. Previous day's low, previous week's low, previous daily high, previous week's high, sorry that's wrong, previous week's high, previous daily high, weekly fair value gap respected, weekly volume imbalance respected. So they're just points of interest for me and things to look at the beginning of the week and see how we go. As I said, slightly more bearish, so it could be a case of Monday, Tuesday trades up, uses this volume imbalance again, potentially even uses this weekly fair value gap again, although I'd be watching this volume imbalance first, with it being not too far away, and just see how we react to that. If we hit one of those and start to trade lower, I'd be more confident that we are bearish and my idea might be right, and then we can look to target Friday's low, previous daily low, or previous weekly low. Yeah, that's my outlook for this week. I'm not married to anything. Like I say, it could be a slow week, could be an inside bar, so I'm not going to get too attached. And just going to play it by ear and see how we go.